Good afternoon, Council. Welcome to the Council meeting for the Town of Collingwood for Monday, October the 17th, 2022. Welcome to colleagues around the table, staff, and those participating either in person or virtually today. With that, I'd like to call our meeting at 2 p.m. to order. I'll look for a mover and a seconder that the adoption of the agenda, that the content of the council agenda for October 17, 2022 be adopted as presented. Could I get a mover and seconder? I've got the Deputy Mayor, McLeod, and Councillor Doherty, and I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. From the outset, I should have mentioned that 7 of us are in the chamber this afternoon, and Councillor Jeffrey is joining us virtually for both portions of the meeting. So thank you. Is there anyone around the table that has a declaration of pecuniary interest this afternoon? Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. 4.1E, 10.1, and 14.2.1, all three are regarding the MZO in one form or another. And as I have done in the past under the Councillor Code of Conduct with a disqualifying interest, I've stated I've had a long friendship with Mr. John DePoche, the landowner, and therefore will be stepping away from the table for any and all discussions.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anyone else? If an issue arises this afternoon, this evening, you know how to act accordingly. That takes us to item 4 on the agenda, which is the in-camera, which brings us here this afternoon. And I'll just read it in. And we have 5 items on the agenda for this afternoon for discussion. Whereas the clerk hereby, actually, I'm just going to backtrack. The items would be A, CAO performance appraisal, B, 145 High Street update, C, 252 Raglan Street OLT appeal, D, corporate updates regarding legal and personnel, and E, MZO update. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exemption provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session, therefore be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to the security of the property of the town or local board, that would be item B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board employees, item A and D, labor relations or employee negotiations, item A and D, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or a local board, item C and D, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, items B, C, D, and E. A position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, and items B, C, and E would apply. Can I get a mover and seconder? I've got the Deputy Mayor and I've got Councillor Berman. Are there any questions before I call the vote? Okay, I'll see none then. I'll call the vote. All those in the affirmative, and that is carried. And at 2:04 p.m., we will move then across to the Braniff Room to a closed session meeting. Thank you. Okay, council, look to have a mover and seconder to rise from in camera, please. Got Councillor Doherty and Councillor McLeod. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And I will now bring us back into regular session. Council staff, welcome to the regular meeting held on Monday, October the 17th, 2022. For those who are joining us both here in the council chamber or online, Councillor Jeffrey is with us. She is participating online. The rest of us are here, and we will proceed as such. It brings us to our land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. As we, just before I proceed with item 6, as we started at 2 o'clock this afternoon with an in-camera session, Councillor Carrier, you had declared a conflict of interest, and as noted on a number of items, just as we carry through, if anybody else comes up with an item as it may relate to the balance of our agenda for tonight, you know what to do. So that takes us to the adoption of the minutes under item 6.1, the regular meeting of council held September 26, 2022, and that the minutes of the council meeting held September 26, 2022 be approved as presented. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? I've got Councillor Doherty, Councillor Thurman. All those in the affirmative, please. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Okay, seeing none, that takes us to item 7, which is community announcements. And we are pleased to have back with us tonight Chief Thurman from the Fire Department to provide an update as it relates to Fire Prevention Week. And there he is. So, welcome, sir. Yes.
Thank you. Oh, thank goodness. I was a little worried there. But yes, a couple of weeks ago, I was going to give you an update of what we were going to do during the week, but now I'm going to kind of tell you what we did do during the week. So yeah, we were really busy. Our crews were doing all the fire drills, as you probably noticed, at Town Hall, at all the schools, at the library. We were doing lots of station tours. We did the farmers market. We were really promoting, you know, the usual, the smoke alarms, making sure everybody test them, check your batteries, check the lifespan still on them. But the big thing this year that I really like to promote all through the years, everybody develop a fire escape plan. Like, check it, do it, plan it, make sure you have 2 ways out. And if you have any issues with them, I always tell everybody, just call us. We will help develop it. We will practice with you to do it. And I really want to promote that this year through the community. And some of the other things we just have going too is we just completed our Alarm for Life program. Most people probably know what that is, but we usually go to homes. We knock on the doors, we talk and see if they want us to test their smoke alarm. If there's any other question, we do it. Our goal this year was actually for about 1,000 homes, and we actually hit 1,800. So I was really proud of the guys for doing that. Our prevention team, they took on a task of checking all the apartment buildings, 2 stories and up. And I was expecting about 1,800, but they hit all of them in town. And that was over 1,500 that they went to for any life hazard issues. We've also been working on our website. I'm trying to make it a little better. We've got a newsletter now that you can register for. You just go to the site, put your email in, and you can actually, if you do it soon, you might be able to win a prize. So I encourage everybody to do that. Another thing we're just launching probably this week is it's the fire extinguisher certification program. So anybody that has a business, you can call us. We'll come to your business. We'll train everybody, test everybody, then certify everybody how to use a fire extinguisher. It's also for, the hospitals, long-term care, all those type of things. So I'm very excited about that. And the other thing I just want to touch base about is we were lucky enough to win 300 smoke alarms from the Fire Safety Council. The intent of it is to give it to people that are in need of any. So I'm encouraging anybody just to call us at the department, email us, come in, and we will definitely give you a smoke alarm. We will even help put it up if you need so. So anyway, that's just a few of the things we got going planned that we have done that we're still going to work on for the next year. And that's about it. Thank you.
We thank you, Chief Thurman, and it's unfortunate that we had the technical difficulties prior, but we do appreciate you being back with us tonight and providing that overview of the events that have taken place, because it is critically important. It is interesting to note that when we travel, we always stay either in a hotel accommodation or some other type of accommodation. On the back of the door is the plan. And it's a plan in terms of what to do in case of an emergency. And yet, in the very homes that we live in, 365 days of the year, very few of us, myself included, don't have a plan. So thank you for that powerful message.
Is that we always feel safest in our homes, but almost 78% of all fire deaths come from the home. So it's something to think about.
Very true. Thank you. Any questions from the table specific? Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Chief Thurman. Appreciate it. Before we go to 7.2 and the CAO, I'm going to go around the table and then I'll come back to our CAO. Okay. Deputy Mayor McLeod for community announcements.
Thank you. I'm very excited about Wednesday. I can't even tell you how excited I am about the newly renovated park at Sunset Point. And more importantly, because as a town, we have not had over the last 2.5 years very many opportunities for openings or events. And it is easy to forget in our excitement to get back to normal, how not normal it has been all this time. And I think we need to, once in a while, just take a little break to think about that. And I'm thinking about when I was on the ice at the curling rink. I'm sorry I missed the hockey game, Councillor Berman. But I was on the rink on Friday, and just what a delight it was to be back with people and just being normal for a little while. And I know we have another wave of COVID we're being warned about, and another variant. But I'd like to just live in a little bit of happiness for a few minutes, even while we honor, the time that we lost and the energy that we lost and the lives that we lost in this country. One of the things that we lost was that sense of community, I think, even amongst this group. And we've had a conversation among councillors today about how we missed out on an opportunity to be as cohesive as we might have been over the last 2 years. And I think that we need to remember all of that stuff. And so the plan has finally come together, and we are going to have a ribbon cutting. I believe there's ribbon. We'll find out on Wednesday afternoon, and the whole town is invited to come and play with us. And I do mean play with us in the fairy forest and all the rest of it at Sunset Point. And I'm really excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Madigan.
To be honest, anything I say after that really excited speech is going to suck. No, thanks. It's been a great 4 years. That's it. Thank you very much to staff. The cohesiveness is definitely not been there because of COVID, but we're going to bounce back and focus on a positive future rather than living in the past on negativity. So thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you. First item, I just want to congratulate the Collingwood Climate Action Team. Last week, they celebrated their 3rd anniversary, and they did a film presentation at the Simcoe Street Theatre, and it was very well attended, including our own climate change specialist, Nicole Yardy, was present. So that was a terrific event. And the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation will be presenting the last in the Be the Change film series on November 2nd. And the film that they'll be presenting is Percy, and tickets can be purchased online.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Berman.
All right. I'm going to look at the deputy mayor and see if she gets this reference and say so long and thanks for all the fish. I have nothing other than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So I'd just like to thank actually all of my colleagues for their efforts over the past term. As in many terms, we don't know what's going to come up. We think we plan for everything, and there's always those things. And most exceptionally this time was COVID. Also, I want to thank staff, but I also want to thank all the residents and those who participated in all the surveys we asked them to fill out, for all the information we asked them, and for coming and participating in our meetings. So, as always, very pleased to have been part of this 4 years. And I think despite any of the incohesiveness that we've referred to, I think if you look at what was accomplished in this 4 years, it's pretty outstanding. So thank you for the opportunity to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. I firstly wanted to mention that the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay is having a series continuing on Wednesday this week. It's an online at 4:30 on green economy hubs. So of great interest, I think, to anyone who's either green or interested in our business community as it flourishes into the future. And I'll just take a minute too to say thank you to everyone around this table and our staff as well. It's been a great 4 years, and I'm also very proud of the many things we've managed to accomplish in our time. And I think as long as everyone at the table is always focusing on the best interests of the community, we'll always get there. And I certainly have felt that this has been the case with this group. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I wanted to thank all of you. Each of you were asked in March to put your trust in a list of very qualified applicants to sit at the table with you and assist you with the decision-making process for the remainder of the term. I feel privileged and honored that you chose me, and I feel even more privileged and honored to have worked alongside each of you. Mayor Hall, I have sat in your chair, and you are doing an outstanding job as the mayor of this community, and I want to thank you and acknowledge all of the hard efforts and hard work that you do on behalf of the community. I want to thank council as a whole. 4 years ago, I was asked, as all residents are in the term, to vote for people, and I voted for 8 of 9 of you. And I have been very impressed with this council. You have listened to various aspects of our community, and aspects of our community and people in our community that I hadn't listened to, I think, with a very attentive ear in the past. And I'm just going to name 3 of them. Pride Collingwood. Wow, what a great celebration that was, and to include a community who's been asking to be included and a part of our community for so many years. You took the opportunity to partner with them and bring them in. The Indigenous community, what's happened at Awen Park, I am just jaw-dropped at the members of our community who participate in that, all wide breadth of people, but to our Indigenous community members in particular, who seem to have an unlimited well of being able to forgive some of the instances in the past and looking to be part of our community, and boy, are we ever better off for it. The Affordable Housing Task Force that you set up, we've had them in the past, but I think this one has been the most effective one. And I say that because with the surveys and community outreach they did, they listened to the people who were mostly impacted by not being able to afford to live in a home, in a place that they could call their own and feel safe. And you put that into place to address that issue. And I am so impressed with that. COVID, where's the playbook for COVID? Who would have thought that could have happened? And you're asking 9 people to come together, along with over 100 staff to come together, and yet you could never come together for 2.5 years. You all worked independently of one another because of the restrictions of this virus that we had in and around the whole world, but in particular to focus on our community. I hope I've met your expectations. You've certainly met mine. And I want to just maybe comment to the CAO and the clerk and the deputy clerk, since I know the clerk and deputy clerk so well. What a great team. What a professional public service this organization has. I am immensely impressed. I walked into this building and I think I only recognized 2 or 3 faces. There's been so much change in the last 12 years, but change for the betterment of our community. The processes that are in place to hold both elected officials and staff to a greater and higher level of accountability, transparency, and clean governance is essential to build the bonds of trust with our community. And I think this council has done that. And I'm very proud to have played a very small 7-month role in your 48-month role in that. And that's all I have to say. But thank you very much for the privilege to sit with you.
Councillor Carrier, I'm very appreciative of your kind words. At the same time, I'm mindful that I now know I will miss the first pitch of tonight's ball game. But anyways, Councillor Doherty, you have a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do apologize. I was remiss in not mentioning that our 3rd annual World Summit is coming up on October 31st and November 1st. And there's a tremendous amount of preparation that goes into this, and we will hear from, as I understand, a tremendous bank of speakers again this year with a lot of topics that are relevant to all of us. So tickets are free and they are available online through the town website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. CEO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a couple brief things I wanted to say on this last scheduled council meeting. We've had a lot of accomplishments with council and staff working together. A few have been mentioned. I'm really glad the asset sale funding was allocated with the community input. That's 18 million or so that's been put aside for things that the community needs and that will make a big impact. We have a path forward for the grain terminals that I think now we can potentially run down, and I'm really anxious to get into the next step of community consultation. Exceptional level of delivery on the strategic plan that council set out and then refreshed in 2020, and the judicial inquiry follow-up, including how to re-envision and deliver our roles as council member, your roles as council members, and my role as our roles as staff, and even our interactions with the community and with the 306 recommendations that came from the judicial inquiry. And then there's all the unexpected stuff, our projected water storage and how we were able to keep things moving forward with a complete community. The opportunities potentially of the popular ministerial zoning order that's we're going to mention this evening. I had affordable housing on my list, COVID, including the task force for COVID and the UN Habitat piece, as well as some overall improvements such as having an operational plan with quarterly updates to the community on all the many projects that are going forward. For those who are intensely interested in government, they could have a look at that. But in conclusion, I do really believe that Collingwood is punching above its weight. That's my favorite way to describe Collingwood. And that we've got a lot of humans in their humanity on the council, on the staff, and the people in our businesses, and just as residents. We identify exceptional outcomes like Awen or like parks that are beyond what you'll see elsewhere. And I think we're ever moving to greater collaboration with the community, and council has led that collaboration in finding new ways to have a two-way dialogue with our wonderful staff. So thank you for a final statement. It has been a great almost 3 years as your acting and permanent CAO. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Skinner, for your comments on behalf of yourself and staff of Town of Collingwood. It is unusual that a council, in fact, probably memory would serve, this is the first time where a council is offering commentary on their own four-year term prior to an election. And I just want to make note of that. And because in past, an election has taken place and we're preparing for a new council, and then the opportunity would be given to the outgoing council to give remarks and make comment. But I think that what's been demonstrated tonight are a couple of things. One, I think that your comments are respectful of the process that we are in right now, as we are a week away from a municipal election. And secondly, they are reflective of the community in which we live in and the many things that we need to remind ourselves of and be thankful of. A couple that I have gotten to know recently, and they are relatively new to our community in terms of professionals. But I remember speaking with the gentleman, and I asked him, I said, well, where are you from? And he said, well, you guess. And so I had said, well, Afghanistan, perhaps. And his comment was no. And so then he gave me a hint. And that hint was Persia, which then, of course, led to Iran. And I just am mindful of that because, of course, they are a couple who have come to our country, who have re-educated themselves through a process in which they were already qualified in their home country to practice here in Canada. And of course, when we see what's happening in places like Iran or Ukraine or many other countries throughout the world, we need to be mindful that we, A, live in a wonderful community, two, that in the next week we are going to have an election, and that I think that we can be very confident that what's been put in place in terms of the process and what those results will bear will be fair and accurate and something worth celebrating. To my colleagues around the table tonight, as well as former Mayor Saunderson, who is now, of course, our MPP. And I'd also like to acknowledge our former councillor, Tina Comey. I'd like to thank you all for your time and effort. People don't truly recognize the time and effort it takes in terms of the hours, the effort, the thick skin that it takes to sometimes be around here. And I'd also like to extend a thank you through to your family, who often bear the brunt in terms of, time commitments, et cetera, and having to acknowledge the time that it takes to be a member of council away from your family and extended families and the things that we celebrate with them. I'd also like to extend a sincere thank you to our staff, both those who are here in attendance, those who are throughout the corporation that show up every day and endeavor to provide excellence and service to the community, to the ratepayers, day in, day out, whether they live here or whether they don't. Doesn't matter. I'd also like to acknowledge on a personal level the tremendous honor it has been to serve in this role. I cherish the fact that I will forever be perhaps a punchline in the fact that I was a councillor, deputy mayor, and a mayor, and never ran successfully for any of those positions. But I'll take it with me. I also want to just take, on a very personal level, an opportunity to acknowledge that I stepped away for a 3-month period, and I never acknowledged that in a public sense. It was certainly publicly, conveyed. But tonight, I just would like to thank those who are here tonight, those who, who you are, who are incredibly supportive of that decision that I made. And I feel that it was the right decision, and I am glad that I did it. And I publicly would just like to convey that because I had conveyed to staff 2 weeks ago, maybe, in a meeting that we don't share these stories enough. And I'm going to take an extra, now that we've missed the first pitch, it doesn't matter. and quite frankly, the Canadians are playing. We've missed the drop of the puck as well. So I'm just going to take an opportunity to share this because it's my one and only time. It was the 20th of February, 2020, and my boys and I attended actually the Montreal Canadiens game in Ottawa. And two things happened that particular weekend. One was the Canadians won 3-0. Two, it was the weekend that Donald Trump said, well, we've only got 16 cases and this will be over in a month or a week. And of course, that wasn't the case. And it wasn't long after that that we were meeting at the fire station and then going into a meeting to determine that we would be sort of tightening down and going into a state of emergency that was then declared by the Premier. I made a decision, and quite frankly, it was the wrong decision, because when I left that weekend in Ottawa with my boys, I knew that something wasn't right. And I decided that to request help or to take a leave at that time would be inappropriate because I felt that it would be a sign of weakness, that it would be a sign of irresponsibility to people who had elected me as deputy mayor at the time. And it just wouldn't be, from an optics standpoint, the right thing to do as we're going into a pandemic. And maybe that's because I had Trump in the back of my mind thinking, well, it's only going to be 2 weeks or 2 months and we'll be out of this. But lo and behold, it wasn't. The point being is that I think the right decision at that time would have been to step away and ask for help at that time, because I would have been in a better position personally to move forward. Lesson learned. And I'm just conveying that because when it came around to finally asking for that help, a couple of things happened. One, the people that I thought that may be judgmental were not. Two, the people that are most important and closest to me were supportive. Three, for all of the failings that we've heard about our healthcare system, I received most exceptional care. Locally and regionally, and I'm very appreciative. The only regret that I have is that, as I've already conveyed, I didn't make the decision based on wrong information, wrong perceptions of how people would respond or react to make the decision earlier. And it's taken me a while to share my story. I am not sharing the details, but what I'm sharing is that it's important for people to ask for help. And one of the things that I conveyed to staff 2 weeks ago in a message was, things are not all right. I am very concerned about this community, about the province, about our world. We are seeing a number of people like we have never seen who are living literally on the streets. We have people in our community who have substance and addiction issues like we have never seen before. We have people who are truly in trouble as it relates to finances. And we now have pressures as we hopefully come out of COVID related to things as it relates to affordability, whether it be inflation, cost of living, and the list goes on. The point I'm making is that the further I think that we leave COVID behind us, we have a tendency to think that things are okay, that we're returning to normal, and that is not true. At the height of COVID, at the very beginning, we pledged together that in 14 days we would flatten the curve. We all went out, or some of us went out, and we banged our pots and pans in celebration of our first responders. That seems like forever ago. And what I would encourage people today, as mayor tonight, is twofold. One, if you are somebody, for whatever reason, who is suffering, whether it be for health, mental health, an addiction issue, financial issue, ask for help. Don't be embarrassed. Don't delay your decision in the case, which was the case in my case. The second is that I'm asking the community that you take time to ensure that the people that you work with, who are your friends, who are your neighbors, are in fact doing okay. Because I am concerned that the further we get away from COVID, the more we start to open up, we tend to forget and we tend to think that we are returning to normal, when in fact, I think what COVID has done and what we are starting to see is that it has created a whole host of issues that were always there, but have now come to the forefront. And as a community, I would hope that with our best days forward, we ensure that we collectively ensure that everyone comes forward with us and no one is left behind. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to convey that this evening. As you can see, I'm rather emotional about it tonight. I've debated long and hard about whether I would ever speak about it. And again, I think it goes back to the part that the more we retreat, the more we choose not to discuss things that are happening in our own lives, the more we continue to create this fallacy that or falsehood that things are right. And I think that if we start to pull back the covers, we start to pull back the blinds, we truly see that people do need help, assistance, etc. They maybe just are not willing. They're maybe just afraid of how people would treat them, how they would be responded to, and therefore never ask. So with that, I'm grateful the opportunity tonight to share that story. And it's a story I had mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, that I am going to start to continue to share. The details are irrelevant. The message is just simple, and that is that I had an opportunity to ask for help and I chose not to. I allowed it to perpetuate and continue for an extended period of time, to the point where then I finally had to step away and get that help that was needed. And the second part is that I'm thankful that I did, because when I did finally reach out, I was surprised. I shouldn't say surprised. I was grateful at the reception that I received from my parents, from my sons, from you, and from the community as a whole, who either reached out to see if I was okay, or who acknowledged my wishes and gave me the space that I required for that period of time. Thank you. So with that, that takes care of community announcements, and I'm going to turn it back to you, CAO Skinner, for item 8, which is our update on the water capacity and land use planning study. Thank you.
No problem. And this one will be a non-surprise, very routine update that we've been providing regularly. There should be a deck. Thank you very much, Clerk Dahl. And I'll just go through things quite quickly. On the second slide, the resolution is here. We've been for some time providing updates, most recently once a month. And the things that we're asked to update are generally included in this deck. Next slide. The situation hasn't changed, although there's been some evolution lately that I've addressed in previous updates, but we do have a safe water supply that's available. Council's been taking proactive and transparent action, and most renovations and building can continue, and I'll mention that a little bit more as we go on. And we are now allocating water with a values-based servicing capacity allocation policy, which I'll call SCAP, as we go through SCAP. Next slide, please. Now, with respect to the planning policy study, next slide. There's 3 parts that came out of the completion of that study. One is the official plan policy. So you've seen that in draft. It's been out for community consultation, and that's working through its way to coming forward in the second draft. The SCAP, or allocation policy, has been had a partial implementation through a decision in May of this year with Council. And then we do have the last leg of this three-legged stool, which is a zoning bylaw amendment. It's been proposed, but there are a couple of outstanding appeals. Next slide, please. Two remaining appeals on that we're actively working toward, and our Ontario Land Tribunal date for those is not until mid next year, so we hope there'll be some resolution prior to that. Next slide. When the SCAP, the Servicing Allocation Policy, came into effect, it says that planning applications for major developments are being processed and coming forward to committee and council, and that short-term exemptions and minor proposals would come through 2 intakes this year. So those have both been completed. And we're within, I think, 1 SDU of the CAP Council set for water allocation this year. And if what will be on the next slide, most likely, is, well, maybe not the next slide, the approach for 23 will come forward in the short term. And if you do have an exemption already, please move forward to get your building permits or finish off what you need. There's a 1-year duration on those exemptions, so I think you would want to act if you have one. With respect to the plant, next slide, please. The biggest things are noted in red, and I think I've covered both of those already. And so things are moving forward as expected. Next slide. The biggest change, well, there's no change on the schedule. This is the exact same thing you've seen previously, but I will note that right in the middle, just as the colors change, we do now have the 50% design in hand, and the public engagement has been advertised. There are 2 sessions set out on October 26th for the public to input, and you can also go to our Engage page for more information. So that starts to talk about the design of the water treatment plant and what will be happening around the inside and the outsides of the building. So anyone who's interested in drinking water or drinking water capacity or what's going to happen over the next few years, I'd invite you to spend a few minutes with that, or to come to the public information session. Next slide. And that's it for tonight's brief updates, unless there's particular questions that the chair allows. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CEO Skinner. Is there anyone from around the table that would have a question? Okay. So seeing none, that will take us to item 9 on the agenda. This will be our standing committee reports. We have a number of them tonight from previous meetings. The first one is standing committee report, corporate and community services from October 3rd, 2022. And I'll put on the floor here that Council received the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held October 3rd, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Got Councilor Madigan, and I've got Deputy Mayor McLeod. Are there any questions related to 9.11? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in the affirmative, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Taking us to item 9.2. This is another standing committee. This is from Strategic Initiatives, same day, October 3rd, 2022. Item 9.2.1, that Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held October 3rd, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. And we're looking at T 2022-13, 2023 budget, preliminary status report number 2, major operating budget requests and budget survey results. And it's a recommendation to receive. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? I've got Councillor Doherty, Councillor Carrier. Are there any questions specific to this report? Okay. Seeing none, then, I'll call the question. Those in the affirmative, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to item 9.3, another standing committee. Yes, please. Oh, you had a clarification for?
Yes, I just, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note that in the previous budget report, which is now corrected in the amendments section of the budget report, as I'm sure everybody saw, we had inadvertently set the public input on the items backwards. So the things that appeared to be at the bottom were actually at the top. So affordable housing, for example, is now at the top of the list with a number of other items that are set out in that link.
Perfect. Thank you. And that was brought to the attention by a resident, which we appreciate and corrected. Yeah. Thank you. Taking us then back to 9.3, and this is Development Operations Services. This was the October 11th, 2022 meeting. And looking at 9.3.1, that the council received the Development Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held October 11, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. P 2022-34, proposed zoning bylaw amendment, 23 Georgian Manor Drive. Recommendation to rezone the subject lands from R1 zone to R14 zone. Recommendation that a legal opinion specific to this ZBA regarding applying a restrictive covenant to restrict the property from being used as a short-term accommodation be sought. Recommendation that a legal opinion be sought regarding a covenant to ensure that the grading and drainage on this property is implemented to ensure additional issues to the flooding of the neighboring properties does not reoccur. Recommendation that staff investigate as to whether the provisions in the property standards bylaw could be implemented to address drainage issues caused by the adjacent property. And that bylaw number 2022-085 being a bylaw under the provision of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, as amended, be enacted and passed the 17th day of October 2022. The next one I'll read in. These were all items that were discussed and passed unanimously by the Development Operations Services Standing Committee. The next one is P 2022-35, approval and authorization bylaw to execute a site plan control agreement, 380 First Street, Crozer Consulting Engineers Office Building. Recommendation to approve site plan application file number D11621, subject to the owner entering into a site plan control agreement with the town to the satisfaction of the acting director, planning, and town solicitor. The bylaw number 2022-086 being a bylaw to execute a site plan control agreement between New Tac Holdings Limited and the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood be enacted and passed the 17th day of October 2022. And lastly, T 2022-14, 2023-2024 Connecting Links Grant Program resurfacing Highway 26 from Cranberry Trail West to Osler Bluff Road, and the recommendation herein is to receive. Can I get a mover and seconder from three? I'm going to look to our Chair Jeffrey of Development Operations, and our Vice Chair Doherty for those three. Are there any questions from members on any of them? I've got Councillor Doherty, and then I've got Councillor Carrier, and I've got Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to the first report, P 2022-34, 23 Georgian Manor Drive, there was a direction for staff to undertake some investigations as noted in the motion, and the results of those investigations were included in the final report, and I'm just wondering if we can ask for a quick summary.
Sure. Through the CEO to Acting Director Ayres, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Mayor Hull. Through you to Councillor Doherty. So at the October 11th Development and Operations Services Standing Committee, committee members requested staff to seek legal opinions regarding three items, one of them being the possibility of registering a covenant on the subject property to prohibit short-term accommodation uses, the second being the possibility of registering a covenant on the subject property to prohibit 23 Georgian Manor Drive drainage from negatively impacting adjacent properties, and the third being the ability of the municipality to utilize the town's property standards bylaw, which is bylaw number 2016-040 for enforcement purposes with respect to the drainage concerns raised by the adjacent resident. Unfortunately, due to the shortened time frame between the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee meeting and the publishing of the council agenda for tonight's meeting, we were unable to obtain an external legal opinion with respect to the 3 requests. However, in addition to detailed consultation with our engineering services division, we also sought input and advice from the town's strategic advisor, who is also a lawyer. And as a result of that consultation, the staff report was amended to address each of those items. I'm not sure if Councillor Doherty wanted me to go through each one individually or if that's a sufficient update this evening.
Actually, I guess without taking words out of your mouth, I guess all to say that based on the investigation that you had undertaken thus far, that there actually would be no way that any of these matters could be addressed on title or through the approval process.
Through the mayor to Councillor Doherty, that is correct. The Planning Act, municipalities currently cannot conditionally zone zoning by. We can't apply conditions to zoning bylaw amendments at present. The province would need to establish the guidelines and regulations associated with that, and they have not done so to date. With respect to the short-term accommodation, I do note that the town's current zoning bylaw does have very specific provisions that restrict short-term accommodation from occurring, save and except for bed and breakfast uses, and the proposed second unit would not qualify as a bed and breakfast under the zoning bylaw provisions. So bylaw enforcement would certainly be a tool to address any future concerns regarding short-term accommodation. And with respect to the drainage piece, it was also confirmed that a covenant registered on title to the property would not be appropriate, and there was further details provided with respect to staff's investigation as to how the drainage is operating in that area at present.
Okay.
Thank you. If I can just make one follow-up comment, and I made the same comment at committee, that I think that as we are now in an age where we're seeing increasingly severe weather events and affecting drainage on properties, affecting flooding on properties, in particular in the town of Collingwood, where so many of our properties are on relatively low land, that I think it will be important for us to endeavor to capture a way in which these agreements can be made, zoning bylaw amendments, when there's issues like this, can be framed in such a way that neighbors can be protected from the potential threat of flooding. This may be something that we can consider in further consultation with our legal staff, and also potentially something that I can pursue at AMO.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Carrier, I had you up next, and then I had Councillor Jeffrey. Were you looking to speak to this item or a different item? This one? Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through you. I watched the meeting. It was interesting. So when Mr. Rossiter presented his concerns about the new septic system field being put in adjacent to his property and drainage, there is no mechanism within any tool that the municipality has to ensure that there's no drainage onto his property, just for clarification.
Sure. Through to Acting Director Ayers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Carrier. My understanding, there has been a permit issued by the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. I'm not sure as to what specific conditions are associated with that particular permit, but the applicant would also require a building permit be issued in support of the proposed septic system that would support the second unit, and that permit has not been issued to date, as there were Planning Act approvals required prior to them achieving zoning compliance.
As a follow-up, so with the building department, if it's passed tonight, and then the building department issues a permit to build the new septic field, is there a mechanism through the building department to ensure that there's no drainage onto the adjacent property?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, unfortunately, I'm not an expert with Ontario building code matters. It's certainly something I could consult with our chief building official, but I'm not aware as to whether they can require, for example, a grading and drainage plan in support of the septic system. But certainly, if that is a mechanism that building services can require as part of the permit, I will happily convey that to the chief building official following this meeting.
So listening to the meeting through you to the director, acting director, it seemed that the committee was frustrated that there was no tools in the tool chest to try to address Mr. Rossiter's concerns. If the municipality said no to the zoning amendment, I mean, off to an OLT appeal, I'm assuming is what would happen. How quickly would that happen?
For the OLT appeal?
Yeah.
Yep.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Carrier, the subject application, I believe, as of yesterday, should council not make a decision today on the zoning bylaw amendment before you, I believe yesterday was the time period within which council does need to render a decision, or the application can be appealed for non-decision. Should council choose to refuse the zoning bylaw amendment this evening, certainly there is the option for the applicants to appeal the decision. And should council approve the zoning bylaw amendment, there would be the mechanism for any individual that provided written or oral submissions in response to the application for them to appeal the zoning bylaw amendment. It's hard to gauge when the appeal may be advanced through the OLT process, as it is a process outside of the municipality. Typically, based on some recent appeals that we have received, the acknowledgement letter from the OLT is taking a few months to receive, and then the case management conference appears to be getting scheduled a few months from that period. So it would be several months at minimum before I think we would see any further activity should that occur.
Thank you, Your Worship. And once again, I'd like to emphasize, I watched the committee meeting, and I know the committee was trying to find a solution, and it didn't seem that there was a solution on the shelf that was readily available to resolve the matter of drainage from one property to another. But I do concur with Councillor Doherty's comments and the committee's concerns that as we see more infill projects, there's going to be more of these issues raised. They were certainly raised in my previous terms of council, and chagrined to say I'm not aware that we did anything about it back then. And I shouldn't laugh, it's serious. So I'm not sure what the solution is today, whether a deferral, but I'm just going to wait until I hear the comments from my other colleagues. I am interested in knowing what the building official has to say about when that permit is issued, and if that's something that could be answered before a decision is made, that would be better for me, but not necessarily council as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So I wasn't going to speak to this one, but briefly on this one, I know the CAO had referred to another bylaw which we could consider putting in place if we didn't have sufficient tools. Otherwise, it would assist us with some of the neighbor interaction in terms of trying to find a way to resolve those, but I'll let her refer to that. My question is more of a procedural one. I was just wondering why the heritage permit applications that were all passed unanimously are not included within the report, but considered separately. Is that a requirement under our Heritage Act requirements? I was just curious. And that would be through to the clerk, I guess.
Sure, and I'm happy to pass that over. My understanding, Councillor Jeffrey, is you're absolutely right that when it was presented to the committee, the 4 committee members unanimously voted moving forward, but their votes were not necessarily aligned with the recommendations that had been presented, and it was thought for the opportunity, if those around the table wanted to pull items specifically, that by breaking them out, that it would be better served to do so. But I'll let you speak to that.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. In addition to the comments from Mayor Hull, it's also dependent on identifying notices being received as complete. So if some of them don't get approved, even though that motion was approved unanimously, it may not, the recommendation would not be to announce it as a complete application. And I know that this is something that Acting Director Ayers could better address, but there is some that should the decision change regarding some of these, it could influence the recommendations pertaining to deeming it a complete application and issuing those notice of receipts, as well as the direction to issue or refuse the permits as recommended.
Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. So respectfully, Mayor Hall, through to the clerk, when are the decisions made when we will not follow the usual procedure? Because I think this is the first time we've ever had anything that was passed unanimously at a committee. There is a procedure for someone to pull it if they so wish. So I just was curious as to why we would go that route and decide outside of procedural bylaw we had to make things run more smoothly, and just decide to usurp it or go around it.
Thank you, Worship. To address Councillor Jeffrey's question, we have in the past, and I'd have to go back and take a look at it, when there is complex pieces within a staff report, sometimes the entire staff report, since it wasn't approved in its entirety unanimously, it has been pulled out separate. But should council wish to apply these and then amend the notice of receipt discussion and the issuance of either the issuance or the refusal of the permits, and pull those out and do them separately, if they are either approved or denied, we could do that as well this evening.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Hall, so I'll just save my other questions then until we get to the staff report. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So at this point, I have the three on the table, and I do have our chair and vice chair as mover and seconder. And I will just note for public interest, there was a public meeting specific to the zoning bylaw amendment of 23 Georgian Manor, at which point there was a discussion and input not only from the applicant, but from the neighbor as well as from staff. And then it was forwarded to our development operations, and now comes before us tonight. So this is the third time that it's actually before us. Just for the public to be aware of that. So, yes, Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to Councillor Carrier's question about the drainage onto adjoining properties and what do we do, you're quite right. Our committee did struggle with that. And I just wanted to remind you that at item 10.5 of our agenda today is a motion I brought at the end of that meeting to try and come up with an answer to this kind of issue. And of course, I'll speak to it when this time comes, but it does contemplate staff investigating updates to current bylaws or new bylaws, policies, and so on to deal with flows of water off of one property to another and drainage issues. So I'll address that later. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes, Councillor Carrier.
Thank you. I did actually note that during the meeting. I watched it. I would request that we refer the matter back to staff, P22-34 for 23 Georgian Manor Drive, and ask for a clarification and clarifications of the conditions of the permit that were issued by the NVCA for the septic system, and further the conditions of a building permit being issued, whether or not it does take into account drainage, subject to a zoning bylaw amendment being passed, since those two questions are really not answered. Thank you.
Okay. Given that I have the three on the table, if the chair and the vice chair are okay, I'm going to sever them out, and I'm going to call the question on the latter two, as there appears to be no indication of question regarding those two items. And to be crystal clear, those two items are P 2022-35. The other item is T 2022-14, 2023-24. So with that, I've got a mover and seconder. I'm going to call the question on those two items, and then we'll come back to the question of referring the first item. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Do you have a seconder to send this item back, Councillor Carrier?
Nope, I didn't ask anybody ahead of time.
You're going to be our seconder tonight? Okay. Are there any questions specific to question that has been put on the floor? Yes, please.
Just a couple of points of clarification from a staff perspective so that you have the full perspective. The decision for you tonight, as is clear, and I'm sure everyone is clear on that, is about the zoning bylaw amendment and whether you would allow the second unit, given that it is larger than a typical percentage of the main house. And this does seem to be a special situation, and I haven't heard any comments, questions related to that. With respect to the grading, there's no change in grading for this zoning bylaw amendment. The structure is existing. We do have the building permit and the septic permit from NVCA. The NVCA septic permit, I understand, has been issued. Typically, there's limited to no implications for surface drainage from a septic. Now, I don't have that definitively for this particular issue, but because of the nature of septic water, typically they're looking for it to be underground and dispelled over a wider area as it's naturally treated by the environment. The chances of a response that would indicate that this septic is going to affect surface water, particularly on an adjacent property, is somewhat limited. I think I know from a staff perspective, we would take a serious look at what can be done with respect to the building permit and also with respect to future policies looking at drainage from property to property. But I just wanted to clarify the implications for the decision tonight with respect to the zoning piece. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before I call the vote? So we've had a request, and I have a mover and seconder through Councillor Carrier and through the Deputy Mayor that item P 2022-34 be referred back to staff. And so I'm calling the question on the referral back to staff, those voting in the affirmative. So I've got two, is that correct? Okay. Those who are opposed? And that is defeated. Okay. So then, if I may, with our chair and our vice chair, I'm then going to call the question on the report itself. Again, P 2022-34, as has already been read in. And I'm calling the question as approved at Development Operations and now looking for approval tonight. All those voting in the affirmative. Those opposed? And it's noted. Thank you. Now moving to item 9.3.2 on the agenda. And this is P 2022-36, various heritage permit applications for painting masonry. And I'll read it in as that staff report P 2022-36, various heritage permit applications.
Councillor Jeffrey is
Yep,
requesting.
Councillor Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So this was my next question, Mayor Hill. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So before you read all of that in, I was hoping that this seems to reflect the original staff recommendation that came to the committee. And what I would anticipate tonight is that we would be voting on the committee's recommendations to council, whether or not we agreed with those, rather than starting right from the beginning. Otherwise, I don't see any reference here that we usually do as to the vote, which way it went and how. And I think it's just, we're doing it all over again, which I can't tell you how much time it took us to do this at committee and to work our way through it. So before you read that in, I'd just like the CAO and or the clerk to clarify what we should be voting on. And I believe it should be the committee's recommendations to council. Right. Thank you. Through the mayor. It may be just me, but it looks quite similar to what we considered at committee. Mhm.
A slight difference, 66 here Ontario, of course, which is the new home of Bion. The recommendation there was to for an approval, but the Heritage was wanting to refer that item back for further information, and we opted to expedite and allow for the approval, and 14 was approved as well. The only one that I'm not 100% clear on is 28290 here Ontario, and I know that that was of interest only because A, it's not a heritage building for anybody paying attention. It's the Royal Bank on the west side of here Ontario, and the question was with regards to the cinder block and the restoration. And again, I think that what's here is correct. So when I read this, I think it is accurate as to what the four of us, after great discussion, came to a consensus on.
Through you, Mayor Halsell, thank you very much for clarifying those. I don't think it's really clear in the wording for anybody who was going to take this up to read it, but I appreciate the fact that it is correct. So thank you.
So I'm gonna read it in and get it on the table, and if there are any specific properties that want to be pulled for further clarification, we can do it at that time. Are you looking for clarification on the process, on the procedure, or a property?
No, it just seems to me that we'd have a lot less difficulty with this if the amendments were quoted in the motion that we're seeing in the agenda, because the amendments in the staff report here itemize exactly the approvals and discussions and agreements that we had. So if the amendments were included here, I think we would have a very easy time of just passing this whole thing.
Okay, I'm going to put it on the table because I think that the report is in support of what is here. And I mean, it's, in my respectful opinion, each property is correctly identified and the correct direction. That's all we care about. That is noted properly. And that's what we're voting on tonight. There was discussion, quite a bit of discussion as to how we arrived or how staff and committee arrived at each of these properties and their recommendations. But in terms of what's written here, it's accurate and reflective of the four of us who came to consensus that night. So with that, I'm going to put it on the table. That staff report P 2022-36 various heritage permit applications for painting and masonry be received. That council approve the September 26, 2022 recommendation of the town of Collingwood's Heritage Committee to approve the heritage permit for 64 Hume Street permit for 64 Hume Street Heritage. And further, that council approve the heritage permit application for 72 First Street. And further, that council approve the September 26, 2022 recommendations of the town of Collingwood's Heritage Committee for 32 Simcoe Street, including the condition of the Heritage Committee. And further, that council approve the September 26, 2022 recommendations of the town of Collingwood's Heritage Committee for 280-290 Hurontario Street and approve subject to the condition. And further, the council approve the heritage permit applications for 14 Huron Street and 66 Hurontario Street as recommended by staff. That the heritage permit applications be deemed complete and staff be directed to issue a notice of receipt to the applicants. And further, that staff be directed to issue or refuse heritage permits in accordance with the council's decision within 90 days of serving the applicant with a notice of receipt. That the following be referred back to staff for further review. And that was, and further, that council endorsed the staff interpretation of the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District Plan contained in Report P 2022-36 with regards to painting or repainting of masonry, and support future staff delegated heritage permit approvals in accordance with bylaw 2022-37 for repainting of already painted masonry. Chair Jeffrey, are you still, you're good with moving it? And Vice Chair Doherty, you're good with moving it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are there any questions specific to the details? Okay, I will then call the question. All those in the affirmative? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that takes us to motions. And tonight we have 5. And I'll start with 10.1. And this is Councillor Jeffrey. And I'll just pass it to you. If you'd like, you can read it in. And then if you would like to ask for a seconder, and then I'll give you the opportunity if you would like to speak or speak last. Speak first or speak last. So,
Just on a point of order, Your Worship, would you like me to step away now or after it's read in?
why don't you step away now? Thank you. And thank you for bringing that to my attention. Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey, if you'd like to read this in.
Thank you, Mayor Hull. That the CAO update council in camera if necessary and the public at minimum on a monthly basis regarding progress on the Poplar Regional Health Wellness Village MZO.
Okay, thank you. And do you have a seconder? I've got Councillor Berman. Are there any questions on the motion that's been tabled by Councillor Jeffrey? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in the affirmative, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you, sir. Come on in. 10.2, this is Councillor Jeffrey once again. I'll let you table your motion and we'll look for a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor Hull. Whereas Hurricane Fiona has adversely affected the lives of countless Canadians and the federal government has promised to match all donations made to the Canadian Red Cross Hurricane Fiona in Canada appeal by Canadians and corporations up to October 23rd, 2022. And whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has urged its municipal members to assist through the Canadian Red Cross Hurricane Fiona in Canada appeal, therefore be it resolved that the town of Collingwood donate $1,000 to the Canadian Red Cross Hurricane Fiona in Canada appeal drawn from the council grants budget, and that a copy of this motion be sent to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, asking that it challenge its Ontario municipal members to further donate to the Hurricane Fiona relief.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Doherty, please. And I apologize, Councillor Jeffrey, on your motion 10.1, I said that I would give you an opportunity to speak either first or last, and I gave you neither. I'm not going back to that, but would you like an opportunity to speak first or last on this motion?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's already in our budget to make it, and I think I think it would be. I think we should help out where we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from around the table? Just before I call the vote, I would just comment, this is something that has been done in the past. That's all. So with that, I will then call the question. All those in the affirmative. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Carrier, 10.3, and this is in support of Bill 5. And of course, this was a presentation that was brought to us via deputation, and I'll let you table it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Collingwood endorse the immediate adoption of Bill 5, Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act 2022, and further that letters in support be forwarded to Premier Doug Ford, Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Brian Saunderson, MPP Simcoe Grey, Stephen Blais, MPP Orleans, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Can I get a seconder for this? I've got Deputy Mayor McLeod. Would you like first or last, sir?
We spoke to it at the committee meeting. I'm perfectly fine with the words that were said there. Everybody was pretty much in favor.
Okay,
Thank
perfect. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just to report to this table that at County Council last week, a letter from another municipality, which the name of which has escaped me at this moment, was on the consent agenda also in support of this. So it is not, we are not alone raising our voices on this issue.
It's true. Thank you. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in the affirmative. And that is unanimous. Thank you. The next two are Councillor Hamlin. So we'll start with 10.4 and I'll let you read that in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas Council deems it expedient to support and manage growth and prosperity, including the finalization of the new official plan, and whereas the Master Transportation Plan is identified in the Community-Based Strategic Plan, will identify items that should be incorporated in the official plan transportation policies. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council requests staff defer finalizing the transportation policies in the draft official plan, currently under consideration by Council, until the adoption of the Master Transportation Plan, and that staff identify for Council a list of transportation infrastructure projects during the 2023 budget process that should be postponed until the Master Transportation Policy is adopted.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for Councillor Doherty? Thank you. And Councillor Hamlin, would you like to speak first, last?
I think I'll go first because not everyone on Council is on the other committee where this was first read in. The official plan that we are dealing with in draft now has not updated transportation policies in any meaningful way from the existing old official plan that we currently have. And there is an intention by our staff that's been expressed to update our Master Transportation Plan in 2023. And that update could well change transportation policies in our official plan. There are two what I'd consider gaps in the the master transportation plan we have now. It was originally done in 2012 and then updated in 2019. But it didn't do two things. It didn't consider the impact of certain roads that will be at capacity. In other words, they virtually won't be operating properly in the next 9 to 10 years. And First Street is an example. Doesn't identify the impacts of that on residential streets in our community and what planning or infrastructure we should be putting in place to address that. Because the existing master transportation plan doesn't address residential roads at all. It only looked at 20 main intersections on the main roads in town. Also, and I'll just read this one sentence from our 2019 Master Transportation Plan. While other modes of travel, such as transit, cycling, and walking, are important components of the overall transportation system, the assessment of their needs is not included in this Master Transportation Plan. So that would also be something that would be looked at next year. So my motion, the first part of it, therefore, is to say, please, staff, continue along and bring back to us the policies for the second draft of our official plan. But let's hold the transportation policies so they're not continuing to be set in stone until they're updated. And then the second part of my motion speaks to the fact that if there is an updated master transportation plan, that could impact, I'm not saying it does, but it could impact certain infrastructure works that we might see staff bring forward in 2023. And so the second part of my motion is simply to ask staff to identify, in the context of the 2023 budget, if there are transportation infrastructure projects that should be properly postponed until that master transportation study is updated. I'll just add that the intent of this motion is not to have any impact on maintenance of our road network, which I'm certainly hearing now that we need lots of maintenance on our roads, but this is to do with new projects, as I've explained. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Are there any questions, comment from around the table? Councillor Carrier?
Thank you. Through you to the CAO, what's the timeline for the master transportation policy to be presented to the next council?
Thank you. Through the chair, Director Slama had updated the committee, and we've put in the budget for 2023 to include this project. We do think that it is a comprehensive set of work. It probably will take about a year to complete for delivery in 2024.
Thank you.
Follow up?
Nope, I did watch the meeting. I just wanted it said out loud. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So I was just wondering, we hadn't heard from staff as to their comments on the prudence of this and how it does work into that timeline and what kind of resources it would take. And that may be through to Director Slama.
Okay. Through our CAO, and I do see that Director Slama has joined us. So Director Slama, welcome. And if you'd like to field that question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, and good evening to the rest of council as well. I think Councillor Jeffrey's question was the impacts of I just want to clarify her question. Were the impacts on delaying some projects or the resources for the TMP? Sorry, wasn't clear.
Probably a little bit of both through you, Mayor Hall. I just wanted to be clear on how staff felt, if this would be a better process than carrying on and in the way that's been proposed and running concurrently with both the OP and the transportation plan.
Okay, thank you for that clarification through you, Mayor Hall, to Councillor Jeffrey. I appreciate the question coming forward, because one thing that came to mind when Councillor Hamlin spoke, and I would, after I speak, I would like Acting Director Ayers to clarify, but it's my understanding that if we were to suspend the transportation policies with through the OP update, that the current policies would continue to apply until we then update the policies. So I just wanted that to be clear for council. And I did also want to mention that we have already started to do some good work in the OP update, because we have included some policies that are related to active transportation and complete streets. So some of that work that has been presented to council and the public then would be some that would not move ahead. With respect to how, when I consider this motion, I do have some concerns, because we do have a lot of projects that we are trying to move ahead with. And I think, one of the big ones is moving forward with a transportation master plan, which we're presenting in the 23 budget. It will take at least a year. And I think it is the right plan, because, specifically as Councillor Hamlin mentioned, right, our last update was really vehicle focused, and it's time we haven't done in the town of Collingwood, one of these comprehensive plans that would bring forward the policies that evolve the policies that we have in the town, such as our active transportation policy, our cycling plan, and then, looking at vehicles as well. So, the plan it will be very comprehensive. It's going to include a lot of public participation. And because I expect a lot of interest and discussion, I think that is also potential to extend the timeline of the plan. So something I think that we should all keep in mind as well, right? That, as we have more engagement and we have and we look at what we want to include in our long-term vision of multimodal transportation in the town, that's going to take a bit of time to come to conclusions on. With respect to the piece of the motion that speaks to looking at delaying some of our other projects, certainly we can bring forward the scope of some of the projects that we're including in the budget. But I wanted to mention that, of course, staff are always, when we're looking at our projects, we're always looking at the plans that we do have and trying to find are moving, or I guess not trying to find, but we are trying to find collectively when we look at asset management and then some of our growth related projects, right? What are the best projects to move forward with? And lately we've been really focusing on our asset management plan and what are those projects. And one example that comes to my mind is Peel Street. We have identified that as an asset management project, but because we're aware of the changes in our community of how we're looking at not roads, our streets. So, looking at, car movement, parking, boulevards, sidewalks, active transportation. That's one of the reasons we've delayed bringing Peel Street forward to council, because, we look at one design and then we think, well, maybe this isn't moving forward with all the things that we're hearing we want from our community. So I think staff are cognizant of what I think we're listening to council and the public, and we're cognizant of what people are looking for. And I feel like we're already taking our time with the projects that we need to take time with. So, but we can bring forward a list and identify if some of the capital projects, if those are really like asset management, focused, and we need to replace that road, and delaying that would not be a good decision for our community. Or if they're a project that, such as Peel Street, we understand that maybe the cross section of the street will look different after some consultation. So we can hold off on that project. So I think that was a few of the things that I wanted to mention that came to mind. And like I said, maybe Acting Director Ayers might just want to clarify or confirm what I said at the beginning about the existing transportation policies, and that they would remain in place if council was to move ahead with the decision to hold off the transportation policies with this update.
Thank you, Director Slama. Acting Director Ayers, if you'd like to add on to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to echo Director Slama's comments, a number of the transportation policies that have been advanced or proposed in the first draft of the official plan do introduce complete streets policies and much more sophisticated active transportation policies. So I just want to echo those comments of Director Slama that those types of policies, should the transportation piece be set aside while the master transportation plan is undertaken, those types of policies would also be impacted by this motion. I do apologize. I'm not as entrenched in the official plan update as Director Valentine is, but I did have an opportunity to speak with her briefly prior to this meeting. And it is my understanding that the draft official plan, the way it's set up, it is quite different from the way the town's current official plan is set up, and that going forward, we're recommending that the policies from all of the master plans that we have out there, and there's approximately 10 to 12 master plans, the way the official plan, the current official plan is formatted, it regurgitates a lot of those policies right within the document. So when those master plans are updated, the official plan is not consistent with those master plans. And my understanding that the intention going forward is that those policies would not be repeated in the official plan, but that there would be a policy link embedded within the official plan that would essentially say that any development application or any project that was to come forward would have to be in conformity with those specific master plans. So we're not looking at taking the policies verbatim out of each master plan anymore, which will eliminate the need to do much more detailed amendments as these master plans evolve and are updated as time passes. So there is an opportunity to update the master plan, have the official plan reference that it has to be in conformity with the current master plan as approved. And that is a mechanism that council may wish to consider.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Just to say thank you. That really helped to clarify it for me, because that would be so much more simpler. Because I mean, the group did give a very compelling, thorough, with a lot of background in terms of the information they had. So they will not lose the opportunity going forward to have that impact through the master transportation plan, and we can simply fix the OP process to refer to that master plan, so it's automatically getting done without holding everything up. So I'm content with what I've heard. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a point of clarification. Good.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some further clarification. Should the outcomes of the master transportation plan result in the need to amend the official plan? For example, we do have a schedule in the official plan that identifies the road classification system. So if there were to be changes to the master transportation plan that would warrant amendments to the official plan, such as amending a schedule, that's certainly something we would pursue at that time. But just the general policies contained within the document itself would be embedded with linking directly to the master plan of the day.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from around the table? Okay, I'll let you go last, Councillor Hamlin, but go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I was very supportive of this motion because I think it is very reflective of where our residents are today, how they perceive our transportation planning is at the moment, and the fact that it may not be as consistent with the way they want to move as it might have been 15 years ago. But all that said, based on staff comment, And based on the fact that we are soon to see a second draft of the official plan, I'm almost tempted to suggest to my colleague that the motion be deferred until we see the second draft of the official plan and see how not only these comments that have been stated today, but also all of our resident feedback that we had during the first draft review is incorporated into that second draft, and then see where we are.
Okay. I've got you as my seconder, so I'm going to go back to our mover of the motion and allow you to offer comment.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate staff comments, but I do think that the comments from Director Slama, I understand that staff's, trying to implement updated thinking on roads, and Peel is a good one because I know the first iteration of how that was going to look, there were no traffic lanes, and I'm glad to hear that staff's still thinking away on the best way to do that. But the policies in the draft official plan are really motherhood transportation policies, because it can't, and so I'm not worried about those disappearing or that we have to have them, because what's missing, the transportation policies don't take into account, for example, our population's going to double, because this is a study done in 2012 that was updated in 2019. So it's, it doesn't take into account where we are now. It's very old transportation thinking and very old transportation infrastructure. It shows, the roads as would have served a community, not even the population that we're at now. So I don't see it as a big stretch to say, let's defer the transportation policies. Now, to my mind, it's actually a sort of a technical thing to do. It's not a substantive thing, because the draft official plan, whoever's sitting here is going to get it in 2024. They're going to read it. They're going to do public meetings. There's going to be no doubt a third draft. We'll be lucky to get it passed through this council by the end of 24. And then it's going to go to the county, and the county's going to spend some time with it. So I think, and I'm trying to remember what we heard from our consultants previously, but I myself are going to be shocked if it's been approved and ready to go before sometime in 2025. So with that sort of proceeding along, we then have the opportunity to complete our master traffic transportation study, make the policies that will fit it, change the road classifications that surely are going to fall out of it, and perhaps even new roads. Or maybe we're going to take some, road classifications and change them dramatically to be lesser roads. So we'll take that, and then we'll sort of catch it up. We can catch it up with what's going to be sitting at the county at that time. So I just hate to see things going forward that aren't reflective of even our community is now. I think it's a waste of time, paper, and energy, and that we should be just saying, take our transportation policies. They're just motherhood. We're doing them anyway. We've heard Director Slama say they're trying to implement them on Peel. Put them to one side and take that transportation map, put it to one side, because it's not reflective of things in our community and things that we need, and let's get going on that part. So, and in terms of the infrastructure, this will be something for the next council to debate. I'm not saying, pick this road or that road not to proceed in 2023 budget. I'm saying, given that we might have a doubling of the population here, and that we know that, once we see where traffic's going to flow in our community, we might make some changes to our road network, that we consider postponing any new major projects that could be implemented or affected by that. We don't know what they are, so we can't speak to them right now, but it's just like a prudent, common sense approach to building roads, and maybe I don't even have to add an emotion. Maybe it's already having such common sense, but just to make it clear, I thought we better include that as well. So I hope that council will consider the, the common sense part of this, and that it's really a matter of timing and making sure that we focus on the important parts. I'll just before I finish off here, one of the startling conclusions of our master transportation update in 2019, anybody know? I know. The startling conclusion was certain streets, and in particular it focused on First Street, within about 9 years from now is going to be at capacity. And what does that mean? It means that the road will not be, there'll be no visible gaps if you want to get onto First Street, and there'll be very limited maneuverability. So you ask yourself, where's all that traffic going to go? Maybe on the residential streets, which gives rise to what I was talking about before, that we got to take another look at in our master transportation update. What's going to happen to our residential streets? Because no one's ever looked at that. But also, the startling conclusion was, we can't fix this problem. We cannot fix the problem of First Street having too much traffic and being at capacity. And for the first time in my life, in reading a traffic report, it has a conclusion that transportation infrastructure can't fix the problem. Usually it's add a lane, add a street, add a this, add a that, a traffic light. No, the conclusion of that plan was, get yourself down to Queen's Park and get a Collingwood bypass, because your community is not going to work. So when I say our transportation plan needs to be updated, I'm not talking about one street or another street or a traffic light. I'm saying the transportation plan said your community is not going to work. You got to have a bypass. And by the way, you never looked at what's going to happen when it's at capacity to your residential streets. So I just finished by saying, please consider, if you would, my motion, and let's defer those transportation policies until we have a plan for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. I'm going to look for any final question or comment, but it's your motion, so I'd certainly give you the opportunity for last comment. Is there anyone else that would have a final question or comment, perhaps of the mover or of staff? And I'll ask Councillor Doherty, just based on your comment, are you still prepared to be the seconder on this motion?
Yes.
Okay. So I do have a mover and seconder. We've had good discussion. I will then call the question or call the vote. Those voting in the affirmative to this particular motion. Those opposed. And it is defeated. 10-5. Again, this is yours, Councillor Hamlin, and this is with regards to the inclusion of drainage in property standards bylaw. And if you'd like to read this in, please.
Yes, thank you. Whereas Council deems it expedient to support and manage growth and prosperity, including enacting and passing bylaws related to land and to development to provide more certainty in the community's development vision, and whereas existing town bylaws or policies limit the town's ability to effectively address drainage issues arising from new developments, construction, or the altering of grades or water flows that create issues on neighboring properties, now therefore be it resolved that Council requests staff investigate updates to current bylaws or new bylaws, policies or regulations that would better address drainage issues arising from development, construction to the altering of grades or water flows that impact neighboring properties.
Thank you. Could I get a seconder to put it on the floor? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. And would you like to speak first to your motion, Councillor Hamlin?
No, I'll go last. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, comments, specific? Yes, Deputy Mayor McLeod.
Thank you so much. I'm in support of this motion, but I would like to see an amendment, and it's friendly. I'd like to include something regarding climate change in the final, therefore be it resolved, because we are, as we know, this week just finishing up the work down at Sunset Point, not on the park, which I remain very excited about, but on the revetments and the work that had to be done following the storm in Halloween night of 2020, or was it 2019? It's been forever. Anyway, and I think we're going to start seeing this sort of thing more in the future. And I know that we have a declared a climate crisis in this town, and indeed one around the world. And so I wonder if there's some wording that could be added to this that would include discussions regarding drainage when it comes to the impact of climate change. And it would be, again, a friendly amendment to the final paragraph.
So you're simply adding, you're looking to, as a friendly amendment, add the words related to climate change.
Yes, thank you.
Clerk Almas, would you take that as a friendly amendment? And Councillor Hamlin, would you deem that to be a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I would look for some help on the words, because the intent of this is to deal with the issues that we've heard at this table now a few times, where one property's drainage is affecting a neighboring property for various reasons, altering their grades. They've done something to their property. We heard about it in the context of the zoning bylaw matter before us tonight, which gave rise to this. But also, I believe in the Sunset Point community, we've had residents come here and express the frustration from drainage changing and going from one property to another. So, I'm all in favor of addressing climate change. I'm just not sure if that is a matter that would fit into this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. I would actually agree. I don't. I support, or I understand, I guess, maybe the intent or enthusiasm, but it is very specific to a policy or a bylaw, and I think that it goes without saying that climate change is an overarching policy.
Happy to withdraw if it's not friendly.
Okay. So, are there any other questions, comments specific to what has been tabled? I'll call the question. All those in the affirmative, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So that takes us to 11, which are notices of motion. None were presented prior. Does anybody have a notice of motion that they would like to present? Seeing none, that takes us to the county report, under 12. And Deputy Mayor McLeod, did you want to have any, or did you have anything that you would like to offer or say specific to the county?
I do, actually. Thank you. So we had our meeting, their latest meeting, on the 11th of October. And I have several items that came through at that meeting that I'm pretty happy about. One of which is an update came through on the trash and recycling and organics cart program that we are also familiar with. Came in 11 months ago, and there was lots of sound and fury regarding it. And people have been surveyed afterwards, and the county did 6 weeks worth of surveys. They talked to 5,650 people, 87% of whom were satisfied or very satisfied with their carts, 88% of whom were satisfied or better with collection services as a whole. And the survey results, in case you're concerned about how the survey worked, it was done through actual reaching out to people. And it was the average county waste program participant, and they have a confidence level in this in these results of 95%. And so in addition to that, the statistics show from this survey that the organics program has actually led to an increase of 8% when it comes to organics than before the cart came in. So we're actually seeing an increase in the amount of organics that is being diverted from our landfills thanks to those carts. And there was actually a smaller than expected, although I don't have the statistic in front of me, sorry to tell you that, smaller than expected uptake of the smaller carts that have that were offered earlier than had been anticipated because of concerns about size and storage. The second piece from the October 11th county meeting that you might be interested in is a report on greenhouse gas emissions that is being done at the county level. Just like us here in Collingwood, the county has now measured its carbon footprint as a corporation. So it's cars and trucks and fleet and the rest of it and the buildings. And they are now, just like us, in the process of coming up with a plan for reduction of those greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there has been a reduction already because of work that has been done at the province. So the county has met its goals for electricity reduction of 10% from levels from 2015. And by the end, they haven't measured all of 2021 yet, but the end of 2021, they are expecting a further 5% reduction on top of that initial 10% reduction. They are expecting to hit that. Again, the numbers are being tabulated, however, and this is even with an increase in services in the last few years at the county level. And also, on the same vein, there was a fascinating report on carbon sequestration, if you can use the word fascinating and carbon sequestration in the same sentence, and about whether the county should get into the carbon offsets business. And as you may know, there are many, many forests, forest tracts within the county of Simcoe, and they provide rather large income each year to the county through selective harvest and so on. But also, those will need to be replanted, the ones that are being harvested, and many of them are coming to the end of their lives as well. And so pretty interesting conversation that is taking place at the county of Simcoe regarding whether the county should actually get into the business of offsets, which I think the phrase was license to pollute, because offsets we all thought were so great to begin with when they were first introduced, and of course now they're not thought of as quite as highly. And yet the question is, will replanting these forests be a net benefit to the environment in Simcoe County, and could the county sell offsets as a part of its replanting process? And could it also be a benefit to taxpayers if we're going to sell those offsets, and then as a result possibly reduce the tax rates? So this is in its very, 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 very preliminary stages because of the vastness of the Simcoe County forest, but this work has begun and it's pretty interesting stuff. And there is more analysis to come as part of the greenhouse gas reduction program that is forthcoming in the next few months, but we got an update on it, and I just want to say carbon sequestration one more time because it's really hard to say, and I'm proud of being able to say it. So there's your county report from last week's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions, comments specific to the county activities? Okay, thank you. So seeing none, take us to our consent agenda, and I'm going to table the first 5 items to be received. That council hear and receive the general consent agenda. Further, that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 13.1 is a proclamation for Child Care Worker and Early Childhood Educator Appreciation Day. That's the October 18, 2022, tomorrow. 13.2, proclamation for National Disability Employment Awareness Day, October the 20th, 2022, and the clock tower will be illuminated purple from the 20th to the 23rd. 13.3 is that the clock tower illumination for Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Month, and that is the month of November, and the clock tower will be illuminated red from the 1st to the 6th of November. 13.4 is a proclamation for National Children's Grief Awareness Day, and that would be the 17th of November, 2022. Clock tower to be illuminated blue on November 17. And finally, that 13.5 is MPAC, Digital Toolkit, RE, the Property Assessment and Taxation in Ontario. So I'm calling the question, can I get a mover and seconder to receive these 5 items? I've got Councillor Berman, I've got Councillor Doherty to receive. All those in the affirmative? To receive?
Just on a point of order, I wanted to ask the clerk a question. Much to my chagrin, 13.1, my daughter is an early childhood educator in the Catholic school board system. We're not really doing anything, but I'm just looking to the clerk, is this a non-disqualifying interest or is it a conflict of interest? And should I ask that to be pulled and vote on it separately?
This is not disqualifying.
Okay.
Like
A non-disqualifying. I see.
in any way.
Okay.
Would you agree?
And again, you should be seeking your own legal advice regarding conflicts of interest. But I would tend to agree with Mayor Hall on this one
Thank you.
regarding it's being received and
Okay. Thank you for your patience.
Okay. So to call the question then to receive the 5 items, those in the affirmative, and that is unanimous. Thank you. Are there any items that you wish to poll for discussion or potential direction? Seeing none, that takes us then to item 14, council business. 14.1, old or deferred business. Is there any old or deferred business tonight? Okay. 14.2 is other business. And first item is 14.2.1, and that is with regards to an MZO update. And I'll give a brief update, and if there are questions, comments, thank you, Councillor Carrier, you're walking away. So again, just for public, on the 18th of August, there was direction given that Council approved in principle support for an MZO for the Poplar Wellness development on Raglan and Poplar streets within the town of Collingwood. Since then, there has been continuous work done on behalf of the proponent, on behalf of the staff for the community. Myself and the Deputy Mayor are working with staff and our consultants being our solicitor as well as planning consultant, Mr. Palmer, to move this forward via the direction that was voted on the 18th. The most recent update that I would like to offer is that last week, staff, I'm going to refer to it as Team Collingwood in the context that it was staff as well as the other members I just mentioned. So our solicitor, our consultant, had an opportunity to meet with the ministry side. And that was a virtual meeting that happened on Thursday, and we had an opportunity to talk about sort of where we were, articulate some questions, get some information and feedback back, so that, again, the proponent as well as the staff representing the community were, clear in sort of the path and an understanding in trying to move this forward. This morning, there were a number of meetings. The most important meeting was one that again was held virtually, and it was the proponents that I've just referred to, as well as Team Collingwood. And this time it also included representation from the ministry side, but also I'm going to refer to it as the political side in Toronto. So this was an opportunity where we had both sides of the fence, so to speak, from Queen's Park at the table. And once again, it was an opportunity to discuss the mandate that was given by a council, where we are within the process, have questions answered, talk to the individuals in Toronto as it relates to where we'd like to potentially see things move forward. This afternoon, that meeting, as well as things that have happened prior, were conveyed to council in camera, so that if they had any specific questions to, again, where we are within the process, they would have an opportunity not only to ask their members of staff, myself and the deputy mayor, but also our solicitor who was in attendance. And there was good discussion in an effort to provide clarity in moving this forward. The last piece that I would mention is that we are drawing, in my opinion, very close to the goal line, and that we are looking within this term of council at an opportunity that would potentially take this across that goal line. We have already tonight gone around the table and given thanks and talked about this term of council, but the reality is that given the significance of this particular item, there may be a requirement that I would call for a special meeting of council, and I'm likely to do so in and around November the 2nd, potentially the 3rd of November, and it would be for that purpose. Okay? So that is the update that I'm offering, and I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor McLeod if she had any additional comments, and then our CAO if there's anything further.
You've covered it beautifully. Thank you.
I thought that you gave a full review. We've certainly been working hard on all the nuances to provide the best staff and legal advice we can. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know that we had an opportunity in camera, but is there anyone around the table that would have a question to ask publicly? Okay, so seeing none, we'll bring Councillor Carrier back to the table. And we will then move to item 14.2.2. And this is an update as it relates to Side Launch Way Public Space Design, Public Realm Plan Project. And Director Culver, who has very patiently been waiting in the sidelines here, is here to bring us an update this evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be bringing some interesting, maybe positive news at the end of this this council meeting. I'm very pleased to announce that we're kicking off the public realm plan that was identified in the budget process that you all went through. Just to recap what that actually is, this is a bit of an expansion on one component of the waterfront master plan as it pertains to Side Launch Way. It starts with a discussion around Block 9, which is the property between the Bank of Montreal building and the future Harbour House building. But it actually will include all public and private public spaces along Side Launch Way from North Maple to Heritage Drive. It'll include North Huron, Ontario, all connections and intersections, and as I mentioned, Block 9 as well, and how it addresses things like the dry dock slip as well. So pretty exciting because it's taking us forward to a place where we hopefully will get at least a Class D type of estimate on what we'll be able to do next to achieve something that's been in the community-based strategic plan since it was first inception, was the public connections to a revitalized world-class waterfront. So this will be addressing those public and private public spaces. So what the goal here is to maximize and synergize all the treatments. And I think it's fair to say, without getting too far down the path, because we really have just had a kickoff meeting so far, so I don't really want to make implications or promises, but it's an eye towards looking at what a side launch district might be, something that connects all parts of the waterfront under a concept that allows the public to understand it as a holistic space. The reason why it's a public realm plan, and I don't know a whole lot about this, so I'm leaning very heavily on Director Valentine and Manager Ayers and others to help me understand this. But the ultimate goal of this is to bake it into the waterfront master plan as a document that will be recognized by the official plan, and therefore basically be encoded for all development in that space. The stakeholder engagement will be somewhat extensive, and we're already starting to plan for that. So there'll be vested stakeholder engagement as well as broad community public engagement to get all of the opinions and test all of the concepts that were originally idealized in the waterfront master plan, and again, hopefully get us to a detailed level. There'll be reports to council because, again, we're trying to, as I mentioned earlier, bake this into the waterfront master plan and the official plan ultimately. Thinking possibly, and again, without putting any pins in anything, that this is about a 7 to 8 month process, and I'll have more updates as we go forward.
Thank you, Director Culver. Anyone around the table have a question, comment they'd like to ask? Yes, Councillor Hamlin.
Very, really exciting concepts. Thank you so much for sharing it with council. I'm just wondering, will there be a design team brought in, or have you brought in a design team, or how do you see this unfolding? Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mayor Hall, and thank you for the question. Actually, I'm really pleased and excited to mention that Brooke McElroy is helping us with the public realm plan as the original architects of the waterfront master plan. It was really important for us to tap into what they've done, all the research and insights that they brought into that development, and move that forward into the public realm plan. So they'll be providing all of the guidance. And as I mentioned earlier, we've had a kickoff meeting so far, so very early days, but really excited to get started.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Anyone else? Question, comment? Okay, thank you, Director Colmer. Is there any other business? I'll just call for one last time. Yes, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I'm bringing a special request from AMO to council, actually, and to staff. And this is with regard to Bill 3, the Strong Mayors Building Homes Act. So this act has been given royal assent as of September 8th. It amends the City of Toronto Act, the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and applies new powers to the mayors presently of Toronto and Ottawa effective the start of the next term of councils. So subject to designated provincial priorities, what Bill 3 will provide for is for the head of council to veto council decisions pertaining to prescribed legislation and designated provincial priorities, set the municipal budget, veto council bylaws pertaining to the budget, direct staff to undertake research on issues relating to designated provincial priorities, appoint council committees and local board chairs, hire and fire the CAO and department heads, reorganize public administration, and head of council vetoes to head of council would only be subject to an overturn by 2/3 majority of council. So AMO believes that the authority that would allow the mayor to unilaterally hire and fire department heads and reorganize the municipality's public administration is at odds with good governance practices. Schedule 2 of the Act would make changes to extend these powers to individual municipalities through the minister's regulation. And it allows the minister to name the municipalities the powers that would apply on a rolling basis. So there are also additional schedules that will follow. So in advance of the passing of Schedule 2, because regardless of the input that AMO provided for Schedule 1, it was passed without amendment. But in advance of Schedule 2, AMO have issued a survey to elected municipal officials and to senior municipal staff regarding application of the legislation to their municipality, and AMO will use the results of the survey to develop input to regulatory proposals and extensions of Bill 3 powers. The aggregate results of the survey will also be provided to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing as a gauge of municipal support for expansion of new powers to additional municipalities. So there is some urgency. I should also mention that the request is being made to individual members of council, so no council motion is required. But I'll also emphasize that AMO is interested in hearing from senior staff. The survey is due based on the timing for the release or input and release of Schedule 2, the survey would be due on Thursday, November 10th, so just really around the corner by 6 p.m. The link to the survey was sent out in the AMO policy newsletter last week. If you don't receive that newsletter, I will forward the link to staff and to members of council. So that is all.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Yes, Deputy Mayor McLeod.
Just in response to that, Doug Ford announced earlier today that he is expanding those powers to Vaughan and Brampton and Mississauga and several other larger communities, Hamilton, Markham, Mississauga, Kitchener, London, and Windsor. He made that announcement this afternoon.
Interesting. Hasn't even been passed yet.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments? 15.1, our confirmatory bylaw. Bylaw number 2022-087, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held October the 17th, 2022, be enacted and passed this 17th day of October, 2022. And I need a mover and seconder, please. I've got Councillor Madigan and I've got Deputy Mayor McLeod. All those in favor? And that takes us to our adjournment. And with that, I'll look to the screen. Councillor Jeffrey, take us home.
So moved.
Great. All those in favor of adjournment. And we are done. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.